Harrison was a meticulous warehouse accountant, always thorough with his tasks, even if it meant staying late alone in the vast warehouse to complete inventory checks. Tonight was no exception. The dim, aged fluorescent light above cast a feeble yellowish glow, barely piercing the thick darkness surrounding him. The silence was eerie, broken only by the steady scratching of his pen on paper, the sole sound in an otherwise unsettling stillness. Harrison stood up, leaving his desk, and walked toward the shelves deep in the warehouse. The darkness there was heavier, oppressive, like an endless black curtain, interrupted only by the faint flicker of a distant light. He let out a soft sigh, trying to shake off the weight pressing against his chest. Still, an inexplicable unease began to stir within him, a strange sense that something was off, as though an unseen presence was silently watching his every step. As he bent down to check a crate, the corner of his eye caught a shadow darting past. It happened so quickly that he thought he might have imagined it, but his heart began to pound harder. He straightened up and spun around, but all he saw were the still, silent shelves. A cold sweat formed on his forehead. He squinted into the darkness, searching intently, but there was nothing there, just the ever-looming shadows. Convincing himself it was only a trick of the mind, Harrison tried to focus on his work. Yet the shadow appeared again, fleeting, slipping between the crates like a shapeless phantom. Each time, it seemed to get closer, moving faster, its presence sharper. Until finally, Harrison could feel it, a palpable sensation of something standing right behind him. He froze, his entire body locked in place as though every muscle had been paralyzed in that moment of terror. A chilling draft crept up his spine, making every cell in his body jolt with icy numbness. The air around him grew dense, suffocating, as if the entire room had plunged into an invisible nightmare. He drew a shaky breath, lips trembling, and then held it as he whipped his head around. No one was there, but the eerie sensation lingered, clinging to him like a formless shadow, always present just beyond his line of sight. It felt as though invisible, razor-sharp eyes were fixed on him, observing his every movement from the impenetrable darkness. Struggling to steady himself, Harrison crouched down to inspect another crate nearby. As his fingers brushed against the surface of the wooden box, an unexpected chill shot through him, coursing from the tips of his toes to the top of his head. It was as if the blood in his veins had suddenly frozen. Before he could make sense of it, an icy hand lightly touched his ankle, a fleeting but deathly cold grip. Harrison jerked violently, his heart feeling as if it would burst out of his chest. He spun around, panic filling his eyes as he scanned the shadows behind him. Nothing. The darkness remained, silent and unyielding, as if no disturbance had ever occurred. His heart pounded erratically, each beat slamming against his chest, but his gaze remained fixed on the ground where the hand had touched him. There, clear as day, was a mark, a handprint. Cold and pale, it stood out starkly against his skin in the enveloping darkness. His foot felt frozen in place, the icy sensation of that hand lingering like a ghostly kiss of death. Harrison stumbled backward, his legs trembling and unsteady, as though his body had lost all strength. A chilling sensation seeped through his skin, layer by layer, like invisible blades scraping against him, making him instinctively curl in on himself. The cold handprint seemed to etch itself into his being, not just physically but deep within his mind, embedding itself as a haunting warning he could not decipher. A shiver crawled down his spine, like a frigid current of electricity coursing through him, tightening every nerve in his body. Harrison knew, even without seeing it, that something was there, lurking in the shadows, watching him, stalking him like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Harrison barely had time to steady himself before a heavy sound echoed from deep within the warehouse. Slow, deliberate footsteps reverberated through the vast space, each one hitting his chest like a hammer, making his heart tighten. Cold sweat began to bead on his forehead, yet he dared not move. Then, from the pitch-black shadows, agonized wails began to emerge, drawn-out moans filled with pain and torment, as though resonating from another dimension. These sounds carried an overwhelming sense of resentment and suffering, alien to the living. They seeped into every corner of Harrison's mind, oppressive and haunting. The air seemed to thicken with each mournful cry, as though the atmosphere itself was being weighed down by a presence not of this world. Harrison stood frozen, ears straining to catch every eerie note. Yet whenever he moved closer to where the sounds seemed to originate, they would vanish, as if they were illusions, or worse, a sinister game meant to lure him further into the darkness. The spaces behind the towering shelves grew darker and more suffocating. Each step deeper into the abyss felt like falling into a bottomless pit. Suddenly, a cold gust swept past the nape of his neck. It was not the kind of chill caused by wind, but the icy exhalation of something long dead. It carried an unshakable malevolence, making the hair on Harrison's neck stand on end. He stood still, his eyes wide with terror, too afraid to turn around. The breathing behind him was steady and deliberate, filled with hatred, as if a malicious spirit whispered vile words into his ear. Each breath struck deep into his soul, amplifying his deepest fears. His heart raced wildly, his blood seemingly frozen in his veins. Harrison struggled to regain control of his breathing, but his legs felt weak, barely able to hold him upright. He knew that turning around would reveal something dreadful, something he might not be able to face. Above him, the fluorescent light flickered erratically, casting fleeting shadows across the walls. Harrison found himself unable to resist an unseen force, his feet moving as if guided by invisible hands. Step by step, he was drawn deeper into the darkest recesses of the warehouse, a place where the light dared not reach. Amidst the dusty old crates, a small box came into view, covered in a thick layer of grime. Its worn, weathered appearance suggested it had been there for decades, though Harrison was certain it had never appeared in any of his previous inventories. His trembling hands reached out toward the box, dread gnawing at his gut, yet curiosity compelling him to open it. As the lid creaked open, an icy draft swept across the room. A dense black fog poured out of the box, swirling violently around him. The mist was not ordinary. It exuded an oppressive, otherworldly cold that seeped into his very bones. It felt alive, wrapping around him with a suffocating grip, draining his strength and pulling him closer to the box as though it sought to consume him entirely. Harrison tried to struggle, but his body betrayed him, growing weaker with each passing second. The sensation was like being swallowed by a void, a space where time and reality ceased to exist. Within the swirling darkness, an object began to take shape. A small, battered journal with a torn, faded cover. Harrison stared at it, and for a fleeting moment, a chilling familiarity struck him. It was the very journal he thought he had buried deep in his memories, a secret he had locked away and tried to forget. His hands trembled violently as he picked it up, the pages within seeming to whisper to him, taunting him with an unspoken horror. The journal contained truths that he alone knew, truths he had desperately hidden over the past months. Harrison hesitated, a deep conflict raging within him. The journal exerted a pull, a force that demanded he open it. Slowly, he complied, flipping open the first page. The faint scrawls and faded images belonged to Hailey, his ex-girlfriend, who had mysteriously disappeared months earlier. Yet staring at the journal, Harrison felt no remorse or longing, only an all-consuming terror. The words and images within seemed to bleed with dread, each line exuding a vile truth only he understood. Buried within the pages was a horrifying secret, a guilt so profound it felt alive, seeping from the crumbling pages, clawing its way into the very core of his being.